Welcome into Pro Football Today. It's time for the post-game show here on SportsGrid TV with Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio to run through the Sunday night football matchup between the Minnesota Vikings and the Indianapolis Colts. Minnesota figured some things out in that second half, especially how'd you get into the end zone, pulling off a 21-13 victory over the Colts. But look, we saw some big defensive plays from the Colts. We saw a lot of high energy. We saw more sacks and turnovers, but don't take my word for it. Let's figure out what Tom has going on.
Yeah, slow games to start things off with a clear lack of scoring. So, first off, if you have the under, that absolutely crushed. Interceptions from both quarterbacks is what we saw. Ultimately, this is the game that the Vikings needed after like two losses, especially like a really close loss, face mask, whatever you want to call it, at the end of the Thursday night game from last week, I guess. This was the get right spot for them. And I'm going to say that they looked good overall. Obviously, the two interceptions from Sam Darnold is not what you want to see, but 290 and the 3 touchdowns is absolutely awesome. Obviously, the return of TJ Hawkinson to their lineup is good to see. Aaron Jones was good on the ground, but not great. 21 of 64, obviously got those yards and those carries later in the game to kind of ice it away with the first downs, which is certainly good to see. This was a good step for the Vikings in terms of getting back on track. Now, we could say, do we take this with a bit of grain of salt because the Colts offense has been pretty bad, obviously, with the change of quarterback, Anthony Richardson being benched, Joe Flacco coming in. He looked good at times. There were, a few throws. I'm like, okay, the Colts offense has something here, but they got absolutely nothing going on the ground, which is, kind of their calling card with Jonathan Taylor. They got a few deep passes to, Pierce and Josh Downs, but other than that, it was kind of a dull game, and ultimately, they didn't score an offensive touchdown. We got to remember that the first touchdown of the game came because of the sack, fumble, recovery, defensive touchdown for the Colts, and they got these field goals. So the Vikings defense kept them in check start to finish. It was a really good game from them, and I think the Vikings, of course, are on the way to competing for the division and making the playoffs. So this is we'll continue to wrap things up for Sunday night. We had a big day of games, a lot of scoring, good performances, a lot of teams bouncing back. We saw a number of injuries, which we should get to. Of course, we saw Chris Olave leave the game. He did return to the Saints locker room after the game, and he flew home with them. Drake London got hurt for the Falcons. We saw A.J. Brown get hurt. A lot of wide receivers getting hurt across the league. Of course, we can look to Monday Night Football, where we see the Chiefs 9.5-point home favorites taking on the Bucs. Should be seeing some scoring in that game. We can, of course, look to Thursday Night Football when we see the Bengals taking on the Ravens. Obviously, the Ravens blowing away the Broncos today. Obviously, a huge ground game from Derrick Henry. We saw Lamar Jackson do his thing. Obviously, I'm going to say one of the front runners, or should be the front runner for the NFL MVP. Divisional game there. We should see some updates on Christian McCaffrey as this week develops. That is going to be absolutely huge. And then, of course, we're going to preview the rest of the games as the lines have started to come out for next week. So stay tuned here to SportsGrid. We, of course, be running through the rest of the games. We'll continue to recap the Vikings and Colts. We'll double back on that. And then, again, recap any of the injuries and the big performances from today. We saw some huge stuff, not only from the running game from the Ravens, but also Zay Flowers. We saw a crazy game in Seattle between the Seahawks and the Rams with a last second, or I should say not just last second, but an overtime win for the Rams with Stafford leading the way. A lot of stuff to get to when it comes to the NFL. Looking forward to Monday Night Football and then getting into Week 10 as we close out Week 9 between today and tomorrow. So stay tuned here on SportsGrid between myself and Kasey Hudson. We'll run through the rest of today's games and a lot to get to in terms of big performances, players, and, of course, winning bets along the way.
Tatum has fixed that hitch. He now shoots it at the top of his jump, his release is really pure. And right now he's shooting it at 49% from three. Now, I'm not saying he's going to shoot at 49% from three for the season. But if he's at 42, 43%, Lord have mercy, look out below. Jason Tatum, right now, my number 6 player in the NBA.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
All right, football fans, welcome back into Pro Football Today. It's the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio. Got everything under control with my AirPods here. Tom, decent performance between both teams, but a slow start definitely in that first half there. We weren't sure whose game it was going to run away with, and plus everybody gets excited when they see a defensive touchdown. Then things turn around. I talked about a resurgence for the Minnesota Vikings in that second half. So let's start with the first half, because you and I don't get to do the halftime show together on Sunday nights. What did you see in the first half, and what adjustments maybe did you make as a better in that halftime?
Yeah, for the Vikings, I almost wanted to see them take more shots downfield earlier. I wanted to see them kind of flex their offense that we know that they have. Coming off of the loss from the Rams game, I thought they wanted to come out flying, right? They had the extra few days of rest. How they ended that game, the big plays that Justin Jefferson made on that game, and they just didn't get things they didn't convert, essentially, when it comes to the Rams game, especially the ending. I wanted to see them come out flying. I want to see them take these deep shots, and they just didn't have that early in the game. They were these dump-down passes, and that's not really where the strength of their offense is. The strength of the offense is you have Aaron Jones set it up on the ground game, and then you have now Hockenson back, so you have this middle of the field threat, and now that allows you to take these play-action deep shots to Justin Jefferson, to break off the top of the defense so you can, expand your offense, because you have this core of Jones and Hockenson underneath and maybe Jordan Addison, but they just didn't do that. And eventually they got there. And eventually we saw Darnold kind of take these shots 15, 20 yards down the field. So good adjustments from the Vikings at halftime. They are the better team ultimately, but this just needed to be a straightforward game from them. Sam Darnold's got to clean up the interceptions, especially that second interception he had was really bad. You get the ball back at the start of the fourth quarter and you're looking to go up 2 scores and you immediately turn it over and put the Colts in scoring position. So it was good stuff from the Vikings. They come away with the win, which I'm certainly happy about. The Colts need to get things figured out on offense. That's just what it comes down to.
Yeah, they don't have much of anything really going on over there. But most importantly, the conversation was more so around Flores and his 56% blitz rate. But we saw a lot of pressure coming in from the Colts and their ability to consistently get to Sam Darnold. But that brings me to the next other conversation that took place in this matchup. It was Cam Robinson being a new addition to this team and being so helpful and a team player right out the gate.
Yeah, that's certainly one thing I think a lot of teams will be dealing with, making new additions in season, especially for a lineman. They spoke about it on the broadcast, he's been there for 100 hours or whatever it was. That's going to be a big key for the Vikings, obviously, with getting their offensive line set. We did see Sam Darnold, like, on the touchdown pass, the second one, he did, like, fall down and hit his knee. He was flexing on the sideline. We got to remember, he had a little bit of a knee get banged up earlier in the season. So, like, if this is starting to wear on them, like, they really need to go make sure they're going out of their way to protect Sam Darnold, obviously, is the key to their offense right now. So protecting Sam Darnold, getting that offensive line intact, getting things moving. And ultimately, I want to see like a little bit of a better ground game from the Vikings. Jones, 21 of 64 is a little bit inefficient overall. We'd like to see him move the ball. We'd like to see him get a little bit more involved in the passing game as well. And then that will open up, the ability to get TJ Hockenson more involved in the offense. Granted, slow game from him, 3 catches for 27 yards. It was his first game back in over a year, coming off of a major injury. So as he gets more involved, as we've seen Jordan Addison continue to develop as a receiver, and of course, with Justin Jefferson, this Vikings offense has all the parts that you possibly want to be a high-flying offense overall. So great stuff from them. On the Colts side of things, Flacco, what are we going to be getting from Flacco and the Colts offense for the rest of the season? If they're going to be inefficient on the ground and it's not going to be Jonathan Taylor kind of controlling their offense, as ultimately I think they should. I think that's the strength of their offense. We're going to need to see Flacco get some of these shots a little bit deeper downfield, as we've seen with A.D. Mitchell, we've seen with Downs, we've seen with Alec Pierce. I think that we should be seeing Michael Pittman as the move the chains kind of receiver, as I say for a lot of teams. That's what we have with the Lions with Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's that kind of move the chains receiver. That's the role that Pittman should be playing. And then we have these deeper shots downfield, which are set up by Jonathan Taylor running the ball effectively. So if we can get Taylor to run the ball effectively, the Colts should be in a spot to compete for a wild card. I'm not going to say they're going to win the division. I still think the Texans are the best team in that division, not to say that they're a perfect team. They still have plenty of issues they need to figure out, but the Colts are in a spot where they can absolutely compete for a wild card. They just need to figure things out, especially when it comes to Flacco, how they're moving the offense, because their defense was like pretty good today. It wasn't amazing. It was pretty good. I think they have some encouraging signs looking forward, but of course, they need to get those things figured out. We have a lot more to talk about on the other side of this break, breaking down the rest of today's games and looking forward to Monday Night Football.
Tatum has fixed that hitch. He now shoots it at the top of his jump, his release is really pure. And right now he's shooting it at 49% from 3. Now, I'm not saying he's going to shoot at 49% from 3 for the season. But if he's at 42, 43%, Lord have mercy, look out below. Jason Tatum, right now, my number 6 player in the NBA.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
welcome back into Pro Football Today, the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio here on SportsGrid TV. Running through the Colts versus Vikings matchup, 21-13 is the victory for the Minnesota Vikings. And then Tom was so well putting it what the Vikings did well and how they found some momentum in that second half there. And then I heard you talking about Pittman being the chain mover when it comes to the Colts and trying to figure some things out. But, I mean, do you think that they're going to continue to sit Richardson and then continue to swap out between them and Flacco, because I think they're disrupting any chance of finding some chemistry between this team?
Yeah, that's a tough question where, there were some quotes coming out this week saying this isn't a short-term thing. It's like a long-term plan. And that ultimately might be the case where, you can't swap back every week, every other week, because at a certain point, like, we're getting to the second half of the season and like the wild card race is coming down to it, especially in a very tough spot where the Colts are. Like, I think they have a chance at the wild card, but given the competition around them, you can't be going this week that. We have to change the game plan. What is our opponent going to do? Is there a weakness that one quarterback has that we think is going to match up worse against it? Like, that is just way, way too much for an offense to deal with. So I think they should stick with Flacco for a couple weeks. And then, listen, if they get to a point where all of a sudden, like, they're out of the playoff race, they're mathematically eliminated, and you want to put Richardson back in for the final 3 or 4 games, that I see no issue with, but like they have to get to that point. And I think Flacco's probably the answer for the next few weeks.
Yeah, and I definitely think that they're going to need that to start getting any sort of cadence going. And plus, Richardson can learn behind Flacco. You might not love Flacco, but he has enough experience in this league to be helpful in one way or another. Now, kind of sticking with the quarterback conversation, Jordan Love was good to go. We saw the Packers take on the Lions. Let's start getting into some previewing of what we saw on this Sunday slate. What did you make of the Packers versus Lions game?
A lot of rain, which was certainly the case. On the halftime show that I do at 2:30 right here on SportsGrid, I spoke about the rain was going to be a factor. I said we should take all 3 running backs in this game, Montgomery, Gibbs, and Josh Jacobs, all 3 of them in a same game parlay, all 50-plus rushing yards, because I was expecting that to be the case. And that was up at a plus 250, and that did come through. So I do want to take a little bit of a victory lap on that. We did see a very modest game from Jared Goff overall, only 145 passing yards. A, because of the weather, but B, we do know that Goff generally does struggle outside. Now, I'm going to say that it was a very modest game. He was 18 of 22, which is incredibly efficient, which has kind of been his calling card all year, where he's starting his games off like 12 of 12, 13 of 15, just moving the ball, and they are so safe with the ball. So what the Lions have is obviously fantastic. Love looked okay. Now, I want to put this like in context. A, he's coming off this groin injury, so he was clearly not moving around well. B, we have the weather to deal with. And then C, like, some of his receivers were dropping passes because of this weather. So his stat line could have looked a lot better. I think Jacobs was fine, 13 of 95 on the ground. Obviously, a lack of scoring from the Packers overall. But I think the Packers, again, will be okay. As we continue to see, Jordan Love dealt with this knee injury game 1 when they were in Brazil against the Eagles, and now a groin injury. We're playing a dangerous game here because this offense is built around Love being able to, have all these options around him. If he's not at 100%, what are we even getting from them when they have one of a tough schedule in the toughest division? It is getting to a spot where we need to know if Love's actually going to be healthy, because I have a ton of faith in their offense overall, but if he's not good to go, that is a completely different story.
Absolutely. And then that just brings the larger question into play. Did they bring him back too quickly, and for what? I mean, the Lions are one of the best teams in the league right now. I know that they wanted to compete. I know they wanted to show that they could compete, but they could have game planned differently, because they did well when Love had to take the back seat earlier in the season after Brazil. So did they rush him coming back?
It's tough to say. Like, you don't want to throw Malik Willis out there and say, like, oh, we're conceding this game against the team that we're chasing in our division, and then know that we have to get Love back and then have the questions, is he good to go? What are we dealing with? Game planning, different things, because the game plan that they had when Malik Willis was starting, specifically in that game against the Titans, like, that was a perfect game plan for Matt LaFleur, but that was specifically for Malik Willis. That is a completely different, like, week prep compared to what they have for Love. So you can't be, flip-flopping back and forth. If Love is good to go, he should be out there. It's kind of that simple, but he may not be 100%. Like, that's what it comes down to. He's good enough to play.
How does this temper you with props moving forward when it comes to the Green Bay Packers and, the guys that they have at the helm to help get them some success?
Ultimately, I don't think it does. Like 39 passing attempts from Love today with 273. He could have easily had 300, 325 plus yards if some of the receivers brought in some of those passes that they kind of dropped solely due to the weather. So seeing Reed still go for 100 plus yards, Watson had 37. Like, he had still at 7 targets. He could have easily had 50 plus yards. So ultimately, I don't think it changes too much if they're still willing to sling the ball, even if Love isn't fully healthy.
All right, that's good to know. Talking about slinging, and that just brings me to the thought of fireworks for sure. Rams versus Seahawks. Rams take the victory 26-20, but was this an electrifying game? A lot of drama, a lot of emotions. Probably not the most dramatic team of the day on this Sunday, but what did we make of the Rams versus the Seahawks today?
This was like the full Geno Smith experience, as people like to say. 363 through the air, 3 touchdowns. We also had 3 interceptions. So the Seahawks doing their thing with Geno, passing the ball. And mind you, he did 363 and 3 without DK Metcalf, which is obviously very good to see. And this is what we spoke about on the Thursday night recap, where I said Jackson Smith-Njigba was set for a big game. 180 and 2 touchdowns from him. Tyler Lockett also doing his thing, 63 yards on only 3 catches and the 1 touchdown. It was a good game on the ground from Kenneth Walker. 25 carries is a massive, massive amount. Granted, they did go to overtime, so you have to take some of these stats with a grain of salt, but this is what we're getting from the Seahawks. They play in these crazy games where Geno has to do a lot. It does put him at risk to throw these interceptions. So moving forward, if DK isn't good to go, it's still going to be JSN, it's still going to be Tyler Lockett, and it's still going to be Geno Smith interception props. I think that's what it simply is. On the other side, seeing Cooper Kupp have a massive game after a bit of a slow game last week is great to see. Obviously, Puka Nacua got ejected in this game, so we can't really look at what he did. But Stafford, I think the Rams are absolutely live to make the playoffs, and ultimately, I think they're live to win the division.
You took the question right out of my mouth. What does this mean for the Rams moving down the stretch here? Seems like they're starting to find their stride. Now, sticking with the dramatic topic, you've got the Dallas Cowboys falling short to the Falcons. And then, of course, you've got Dak Prescott, who seems to have mouthed that his team sucks right now. You have Ezekiel Elliott that did not dress because apparently he's been missing meetings and tardy to everything possible. So what's taking place not only with the Dallas Cowboys, but what did we see in this 21-27 matchup?
Oh, man, is Dak even healthy? He's got this hamstring thing that he said he's never felt before. CeeDee Lamb apparently needs to get an MRI on his AC joint in his shoulder. They play the Eagles next week, and granted, the Eagles didn't cover today. They look good at times. They look bad at times, especially later in the game, allowing the Jags to come back. A.J. Brown got hurt for the Eagles. But, man, if Dak is not good to go and/or he's not 100%, CeeDee Lamb is not good to go and/or he's not 100%, like, what faith do we have in the Cowboys to do anything right, knowing that the Eagles want to come in here and, jump all over a bad and injured Cowboys team? I don't know what the line is for that game. I don't know if it's out yet because of the Dak news. I would love to see if it is out. It's 6.5. The Eagles are 6.5-point road favorites. Okay, that's my first time seeing it. There's no, if Dak gets ruled out, I don't know how the Eagles shouldn't be covering that game.
You don't have any hope for Cooper Rush to be able to lead this team to make anything happen? No, I'm just kidding. But also the Eagles
if CeeDee Lamb's not healthy, what are we going to get from their offense? Their running game is terrible to begin with.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, talk about a team that doesn't seem to have any sort of plan. We're going to get ready to come up against a break here, but when we get back, we've got to get into the fact that the Eagles almost let up versus the Jaguars. I mean, to just see what happened in the second half of that game was completely insane, but that's what made Sunday football so special amongst the mini games that were pretty exciting and wild today. So make sure you don't go anywhere. Make sure you're following SportsGrid over at SportsGrid, as well as Tom and myself. We're going to continue to run through this Sunday slate. More importantly, get you guys starting to look ahead of the week. And then you always know where to find us on Monday nights. It's Pro Football Today here on SportsGrid.
has fixed that hitch. He now shoots it at the top of his jump, his release is really pure. And right now he's shooting it at 49% from three. Now, I'm not saying he's going to shoot at 49% from three for the season. But if he's at 42, 43%, Lord have mercy, look out below. Jason Tatum, right now, my number 6 player in the NBA.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into Pro Football Today, the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio. As we mentioned, a wild Sunday slate at hand. So let's go ahead and dive into one of the other games that took place today. That would be the Bengals versus the Raiders. Bengals putting up a beating of 41 points, topping the Raiders 41-24. Tom, not only did what we make of this game, but what news came out of this game?
Yeah, just as we were going to break, seeing that the Raiders have fired their OC, Luke Getsy, not too much of a surprise. Like, ultimately, I don't know what this changes. Like, it's a bad team. It's a bad offense overall. What are you going to be getting from who's going to be taking over the play calling duties moving forward? It's not going to be Antonio Pierce. He's a defensive guy. But the Raiders have been starting Gardner Minshew, but we did see him get pulled, and they brought in Desmond Ridder. So a part of me kind of wants to take Gardner Minshew unders every game if there's going to be this threat of another quarterback coming in. And it's not just Desmond Ridder. We saw this with Aiden O'Connell before he got hurt. I will say I think there's going to be continuous value looking to either Jacoby Myers, who went 8-105 today, or Brock Bowers, who went 5-45-1, simply because the Raiders are always going to be playing from behind because their defense is so bad. They literally have to pass the ball. So unders on their running backs, overs on Jacoby Myers or Brock Bowers. On the other side, Joe Burrow it was like a master class from him today. 5 touchdowns from him. He started off the game, I think, 12 of 12 or 12 of 13. Chase Brown commanded the backfield with Zach Moss out, 27 carries, 120 through the air. And then Mike Gesicki, as we were talking about in break, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns from him. Slow game from Jamar Chase, but ultimately he didn't have to do a whole lot. Even with T. Higgins out, it was a big game from Chase Brown and Mike Gesicki. The Bengals are on a short week. They play on Thursday night, which is a game we will be doing, going up against the Ravens.
I'm excited to see what comes in play for that, because hopefully this is one of those games that the Bengals can actually build off of. I know it's a bad Raiders team, but still, we've been waiting to see the Bengals string together better games more consistently, one after the other. Now, talking about stringing together better games, 2 weeks ago, if you would have asked anybody about the Eagles, they didn't know what to expect out of this Eagles team. Injuries obviously were a problem in the beginning of this season, but it still took them a minute to kind of get their footing underneath them. More injuries pile up and almost allow the Jaguars back into this matchup today. What did we see in their narrow escape topping the Jaguars?
Yeah, not covering, which was, dismay to some, myself included. But A.J. Brown gets hurt. That's a huge note for that. Devonta Smith is still awesome, that amazing one-handed catch. Saquon Barkley, 27, 159 and 1 on the ground, and 340 and 1 in the air. He's just absolutely unbelievable. Like, I spoke about him on the 12 p.m. start-sit show that I do here. And I was like, Saquon Barkley probably going to push for over 100 yards. I didn't expect him to have 200 yards on the ground, or 200 yards total and almost 200 yards on the ground. So if we see A.J. Brown out, depending on what we get, not only from him, but Dallas Goedert is still out. So Grant Calcaterra could continue to play a big role, along with Jahan Dotson. We got to remember that they traded for Dotson at the end of training camp. So they need that wide receiver depth now with A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert out. On the Jags side of things, I don't know what we can make from them. Christian Kirk is done for the season. They're probably going to trade him anyway. Evan Ingram might be the best option overall on their team. Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, they get absolutely nothing going on the ground, and Trevor Lawrence continues to turn the ball over.
Yeah, they still have a lot to figure out, but a team that we thought was going to probably manage a bit differently, the Miami Dolphins head up north to take on the Buffalo Bills, and look, wasn't too bad of a performance. They only fell short by 3 points. Bills come out on top 30-27. What did we learn in this matchup? I mean, whenever you have in division rivalries, you can always expect anything to happen, but I'm not sure if everybody was expecting the Dolphins to hang in this tight.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, where I think that my biggest takeaway from this game is the Bills are never out of it with Josh Allen. And what we saw from them, specifically in the second half, because they had 6 points in the first half, absolutely terrible. I got to be honest, I wish I jumped on the Bills live, their money line halftime. I saw this thing at minus 118. I was like, I don't know if I want to go there. I already have them, on this spot. I have, players on this spot. I don't want to double down on things. And ultimately, I think that was the play because Josh Allen continues to come back in games. We saw it in the week 1 of the season when they came back against the Cardinals. I think that's what we get from the Bills, where as long as Josh Allen has these weapons around him, he's absolutely never out of the game. On the other side, Tua played pretty well. 25 of 28 for 231 and 2 touchdowns is pretty good. This is almost exactly what we saw last week, where Tua played well. They moved the ball well in offense, Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert, and it's their defense that is collapsing. Their defense lost to the Cardinals last week. It's not Tua's fault that they gave up 30 points when he was 25 of 28 today. So the Dolphins season is basically over at this point.
I know, it's so tough to kind of digest regardless of Tua's situation, because I'm telling you, heading into this season, a number of people were like, wait, Dolphins aren't getting enough respect on their name. They should be able to deliver or pack a more powerful punch this season. That just has not been the script. Another script, you and I kind of talked about this during Thursday Night Football. If we come up too close to the break, we'll continue the conversation on the other side. The Bears take a beating from the Cardinals, 29-9. What the heck happened there, Tom?
I got to say, I don't think the Cardinals are as good as their record. I think given the injuries that the 49ers have, and I don't just want to say it's, faith in the Rams, I think the Rams can win that division, as I mentioned. The Cardinals, they're beating the Bears. They beat the Dolphins. They're coming away with wins that I'm not going to say they don't deserve these wins, but, Kyler going for 154 yards. They get 3 rushing touchdowns. And now, granted, one of them was to Trey McBride. That could have easily been a passing touchdown, but Trey McBride's their leading pass catcher with 35 yards. Higgins is at 34. Marvin Harrison's at 34. Yeah, they move the ball awesome on the ground with James Conner, but there's something about this team that, they just don't they don't have that it factor for me. I don't want to say that I think they're frauds because they are 5-4, but tell me when they beat really, really good teams, right? When they start beating really, really good teams, then let me know, because when you beat the Dolphins, you beat the Bears, they also beat the Chargers. You just don't have me convinced yet. That's what it comes down to. They lost to the Bills. They lost to the Lions. They lost to the Commanders. They lost to the Packers. They're losing to good teams, and they're beating bad teams. I'm not sold.
It is a good point. And a lot of the games have been tough to watch, and there hasn't been any kind of patterns to their winning style at all. I get it. A win's a win. Gritty win's a gritty win. But still, they just are kind of pulling off these outlandish W's and then moving along. So I'm not against you when it comes to their record, kind of speaking some weird facts there. Stick with us here on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid TV. A little bit more to unpack here on SportsGrid.
has fixed that hitch. He now shoots it at the top of his jump, his release is really pure. And right now he's shooting it at 49% from three. Now, I'm not saying he's going to shoot at 49% from three for the season. But if he's at 42, 43%, Lord have mercy, look out below. Jason Tatum, right now, my number 6 player in the NBA.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions. Get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
You are watching Pro Football Today, the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio, running through the Sunday slate. And I feel like the theme of today is just talking about quarterbacks and some crazy plays or lack thereof that we saw all day long. So let's get to it. Chargers beat the Browns, but that's not even the biggest thing. The 27-10 victory? No, it's Jameis Winston's 3 interceptions. Why am I mentioning that? Not because it's a surprise, because Browns fans thought they finally found an inkling of hope with Winston at the helm. What did we make of the 27-10 beating that the Chargers put on the Browns?
Yeah, quite a different story of what we saw from Winston going for 300-plus yards last week and beating the Ravens, now going 235, 1-3 through the air. When it comes to Cleveland, I think their offensive line is kind of bad, and we're seeing that. Now, granted, they did play a tough run defense today in the Chargers, but seeing Winston with 46 passing attempts is not really what you would expect from a quarterback from Cleveland under Stefanski, like normally a run-first offense. But if their offensive line isn't as good as I truly think I think it's pretty average, Winston's going to sling the ball. Like we've said before, it firsthand. Like he's going to sling the ball, good or bad. And that just means passing attempts for Winston is maybe the safest route to go when it comes to betting on the Browns, and probably Cedric Tillman and David Njoku as the pass-catching options. On the other side, the Chargers, they're winning games. They like to play slow. They like to run the ball. I will say Justin Herbert's throwing the ball more, and he's piling up more yards than I anticipated over the past few weeks. They did get Quentin Johnson back today. He went for another huge game. So I'm encouraged by the Chargers, but I'm not willing to fully buy in on them yet.
Yeah, I think that they learned that the whole just run the ball as much as possible was not working for them, especially when you have a guy like Herbert. I get it. He's been banged up, a number of injuries. There were so many questions heading into this season, but still it just did not fit the script, or at least what we expected out of the Chargers. Moving on from that one, we've got the Commanders coming out on top of the Giants 27-22, but guys, the Giants put up 22 points. Did we expect that one? I mean, Commanders have had some close games. Yes, they've let up a number of points, but sometimes their defense has been a little surprising and a little, unexpected in a way. So what did we make of this matchup?
I just got to note that the Daniel Jones stat line at halftime was absolutely hilarious. He had 1 passing touchdown, despite the fact that he had 0 passing yards, because some of the passes ended up going for a negative yard. Just a funny stat line. Giants are who they are. Yeah, they scored more points. I will say, they did move the ball effectively on that Monday night game we did for the Steelers. They just didn't convert touchdowns. And it's kind of been their thing all year, or not just year, but for many years, where they move the ball and kind of pile up some yards, obviously, when Saquon was there, but then the drive stall out and they just had to settle for field goals. They actually got some touchdowns today, so it's good to see. It's good to see that Neighbors finally got involved. He had a very, very slow first half. Daniel Jones, the 2 touchdowns, the 1 on the ground, rushing, doing their thing. For the Commanders side of things, they didn't have Brian Robinson today, but we saw a big game not only out of Austin Eckler, but also out of Chris Rodriguez Jr., who is their 3rd-string running back. So he can continue to play a big role if we do see Brian Robinson again. And, Daniels looks awesome. The thing I have to note is that, Noah Brown, 60 yards, Zacchaeus, 48 yards, Austin Eckler, 41, De'Ami Brown had 24, and Terry McLaurin only had 19 yards, where there's not always one dominant receiver when it comes to Washington, because they have so many options. They can spread it around, which can actually make targeting their players really, really tough. So the Commanders are awesome. Daniels is awesome, but actually from a prop perspective, they can actually be kind of difficult just because they have too many options and we don't know who's going to have the big game sometimes.
Yeah, well, definitely a few things to continue to look forward to as we are officially at that halfway point season of the NFL season, if I'm not mistaken. And look, a less awesome point, Tom, is going to be talking about the Saints and the Panthers. Panthers come out on top, narrow escape, 23-22, and this one just kind of looked like a bloodbath in a number of ways against the clock. But what did you make of this one?
Good for Bryce Young for getting win at home. Like to see him, finally pull that through. Kamara's awesome for the Saints. Over 200 yards. We saw Chris Olave get hurt. He got carted off the field. Apparently, he is going back with the team. That's good to see. Carr is back. I still think the Saints are going to have a tough time moving the ball. If Olave's not there, we already know that Rashid Shaheed is out. Kamara is going to be the guy that's going to see 29 carries today, and he had 6 receptions. Like him seeing a minimum of 20 total touches is probably what we should expect from them every single week.
Yeah, and it's been so crazy to think of the night and day that we've seen out of the Saints and their offense. Yes, injuries included, but regardless, it's just almost like the game plan semi-changed. But don't worry, we're going to bring the excitement back because you guys know where to be on Monday night for Monday Night Football, joining Tom Vecchio and myself, as well as Adam Kaufman and Dave Sherpin for Pro Football Today, the pregame show. So make sure you come hang out with us tomorrow at 7 p.m. on SportsGrid TV, but keep all your NFL coverage with us here on SportsGrid. Follow Tom, follow myself, follow SportsGrid, and everybody have a wonderful Sunday night.